The 152nd edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphreys, King likes the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Minnie.
With 20 seconds left to play, goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 45. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Tonight I'm joined by both Anthony Pagnotta and Mark Krings as we're going to recap and break down Carolina's 3 games in 3 days in the relocated Maui Invitational in Asheville, where Carolina went 2-1. They won their first 2 games and lost the championship game on a near buzzer beater against Texas. As they always seem to do, Texas makes plays when Carolina doesn't, and they find a way to beat the Tar Heels. So, fellas, we're going to start with UNLV, and this will be kind of a quicker breakdown of what happened in that game, just mainly because Carolina won by 27. But I think there was enough that happened for us to talk about. And I'll start with how Carolina started. And it wasn't very pretty. It was 13-0 at the end of the first media timeout. They went almost 7 minutes without scoring. And in that time, Roy Williams didn't blink. He didn't call timeout. He just kind of stood there. And which kind of shows you how comfortable he is with this team to let them kind of go through that kind of experience where he didn't try to bail them out, even though they are very, very young. And they bailed themselves out. They came back and outscored UNLV 37-17 to finish the rest of the first half to take a 7-point lead into halftime. And in the second half, they just wore them down. Carolina's length, size, everything about Carolina that is good about them was on display in the second half in a rout. And Anthony, you and I were on the phone, as we usually are for these kind of games. And it wasn't a pretty start, but I think you got to look at the way Carolina responded. And I wrote this in my recap article after the game, that they now can draw on that experience from being down double digits, still have confidence, and work themselves back into the game and win games.
Yeah, that's the difference, I think, in this team from last year's team. That feels like a game that, Carolina probably would have battled their way back into the game. But that game a year ago probably would have been a game that goes until the under 4 timeout, maybe even further than that. And Carolina would have had to find a way to win in the last couple of minutes. That's the area where you're seeing a more confident Carolina team this year. The freshmen have more confidence in themselves. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely concerning. The fact that this has been just about every game so far this year where, even against the College of Charleston, wasn't a great start on the offensive end. Just not efficient, guys not moving well, guys not spacing well. But, that's something that this group just has to get figured out. And, the reason why it's probably going to be an issue for a while here is because this is an unorthodox offseason, as we've talked about many times. So they're going to have to grow in season. And, I think that the good news from that was that was the worst start that we saw out of any of the games. Carolina could have came out and played the same way, even worse potentially, against better opponents in Stanford and Texas, but they didn't. But that's one of those games that it just shows you that you've got to be prepared for whoever the opponent is on the other side. Coming into the game, I don't think any of us were looking at UNLV and saying, okay, this is a good basketball team, a team that should challenge Carolina. But early on they did, before Carolina did what they were supposed to do, which was pull away. And again, it goes through the big men. That was where they had the most success. I think that you should just continue to get looks at these big guys, and you'll like just about everything that you see from them. But the other thing in that game that was really encouraging was the play of R.J. Davis. And I told you when we went into this tournament, the biggest thing that I was watching was what would R.J. Davis do? How would he be able to, sort of take over that role at shooting guard? Would he be able to sort of cement himself into that starting role? And that game against UNLV was a heck of a start.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the way you touched on it, you always want to get out to a good start, but being able to overcome a bad start is also something important for teams to possess, specifically when the team is young, which obviously is the case with Carolina, especially in the backcourt. I just hope that, they establish a routine or a consistency of coming out and getting off to a good start instead of saying, hey, we know we can battle back. They got to bring the energy from the get-go, and I've wrote it multiple times. We talked about it multiple times. Some of the starts they've had in the so far short season, it will not bode well for them when it comes to ACC play. So it's important that they figure that out. Something else that we talked about, I think it was in the last podcast and for sure in the articles, was mental toughness. Being away from the Dean Dome and knowing that some things are not going to go their way, they're going to have to adjust, they're going to have to bounce back a little bit. It was good to see that there is at least some level of mental toughness amongst this team that, maybe last year would have been a different outcome. This year, not only did they fight back early, but they kind of took somewhat control of it before halftime, and then, as both of you alluded to, it's kind of just a matter of handling them from there, which we all thought they would do. So, other positives from that game, I always like to see balanced scoring, which has been a theme throughout all of the games, which is good that, we could have somebody different each night that goes off and can give us, 20 points, but then by the same token, we also have 5 or 6 guys that can give double figures. And then kudos to Andrew Platek for that game. I think, he's been a highly discussed player in terms of what he brings, what his minutes and role should look like. I thought that game he did a nice job coming in, was very productive in the minutes that he got, and I hope that that's the Andrew Platek that, the Carolina team can see on a consistent basis moving forward. A few things as far as, opportunities that stuck out. When UNLV doubled the post and trapped it immediately, we struggle with that right off the get-go. And I was, hopefully there can be adjustments made for better passing, not only back out to the guards, but way better passing between, the big men, because there were times where one of the big guys, specifically Baycott, was kind of trying to dribble out of it, and Brooks was standing under the basket wide open for a dunk if we're able to get him the ball. With Baycott's height, he can certainly get him the ball. He just didn't see it and didn't react quick enough. So I think that's an adjustment that we're going to continue to have to make. And free throws, which unfortunately was also a consistent theme throughout the tournament.
Yeah, Mark, I think you brought up some good points with Carolina and how they handled getting doubled in the post, because every team they saw in Asheville doubled the post as often as they probably could, and Carolina got mixed results out of that. And I think that's expected because you've got young post players, you've got young perimeter players, but at some point it's just basic, some basic basketball fundamentals about how to handle a double team, and we expect them to grow from that. I think one thing that really stood out in the UNLV game before we move on to Stanford, Walker Kessler, when he puts on weight, that guy's going to be a problem because he's just so much longer than anyone else. He is, John Henson-esque, maybe even Bryce Johnson-esque, where he doesn't even have to jump to get rebounds. And there were times in that game where he was just standing flat-footed and still grabbing the ball and either putting it back up or kicking the ball back out, and we were resetting our offense. And it was a really good showing for him as he's trying to, work into the rotation, getting consistent minutes, and getting confidence as a player. The free throws, that was a consistent struggle in all three games, and we'll start talking about the Stanford game with that. And I don't know about you guys. I've been watching Carolina play basketball for over 10 years. That was as physical a non-conference game I think I've ever seen them play. I think Stanford really looked to be the type of team that we think they can be with all the young talent they've brought in and some of the veteran talent they've got on that roster. And they brought it to Carolina, and they beat Carolina up for the first 10 to 15 minutes of that game. But as Carolina did in the College of Charleston and in UNLV, they punched back. And I think it was really interesting to see, and Mark, I'll let you kind of comment on this. Carolina matched their level of toughness, and that's really positive to see from a team that is this young and it's really early in the season to see that.
Yeah, that was kind of just a back and forth battle a little bit. I don't know specifically what the largest lead in that game was. I'd probably say it was anywhere from, probably 5 points either way. It was fun to see how the physicality on the block led out to the physicality in the backcourt also, and it was just back and forth, and neither team could really pull away. I will say, though, that I think some of the reason that Carolina couldn't pull away as, I wouldn't say as quick as they did, but the reason they couldn't maybe create the separation that I thought they could have is the turnovers. We had 24 turnovers on 72 possessions. Anytime that you turn the ball over on a third of your offensive possessions, you're certainly going to have some offensive struggles. In terms of scoring, overall continuity, just getting the game going the way that you want it to do. So, you can attribute some of that to the physicality of the game, but, we've got to be able to handle that. And, I think as a young team, I think that was a great game for them to learn and understand moving forward what the physicality of college basketball entails. And specifically when you get in, the next two games, unless there's another one in between, but I think it's Iowa and then it's Ohio State. And then sooner and later, you're going to be in the ACC. So I think that was a great game for Carolina to, especially the freshmen, to get acclimated to how physical it will be. Again, it took a certain level of mental toughness to pull away at the end. I thought Leaky Black did a great job down the stretch, specifically shutting down Zaire Williams. It was just a good win to get. I don't think that Carolina necessarily played their best basketball, but as we saw, they certainly played well enough and tough enough to come away with a win, and they did that by making a few plays down the stretch.
Yeah, that was the one thing that we didn't see against UNLV. Carolina just really struggled out of the gate shooting the ball. That was why they got down so big. The final two games, primarily this game against Stanford, Carolina just could not stop turning the ball over. That was the one thing that allowed Stanford to sort of hang around, even though they weren't having a really efficient night. The other thing, of course, was the fact that Carolina got in a lot of foul trouble. Again, you can, take it or leave it if you like the calls or not. I think there were definitely some that were questionable, but that probably goes both ways. But yeah, that was the thing that concerned me the most in this game. Mainly, we've seen the first two games of the year, we thought, okay, Taylor Love is doing a pretty decent job of hanging on to the basketball. He's not making the big mistakes that we saw at times last year from Cole Anthony, from some of the other guys. And then right as we said that, it seems like now they're starting to make some of those similar mistakes. It's not only just him. Jay Davis has had some problems with turnovers. A lot of the big guys had problems with turnovers as well. And that's something that Carolina has got to eliminate down the stretch, once they get into ACC play. That just simply can't happen. As of right now, I don't know if that's something that's going to be possible to eliminate, that quickly. You would hope so because they're not going to be able to do that against Iowa and Rin. But